Welcome to Africa Express. Today we are going to South Africa. Today we are also going to be discussing social justice. The person to discuss this with us today is Reverend Pastor Montajane, who is a pastor at Pearl Street United Methodist Church in Brockton and also United Methodist Church in Whitman. Welcome to Africa Express.
Thank you very much.
You look very beautiful, I have to say that. I love South African colors, and yes, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Okay.
We are going to be talking about social justice. The reason why I kind of like picked South Africa,
yes,
is they've gone through a transition. They went through a period of time where there was turmoil and so much injustice in that country. And now they seem to be stable, at least within that region.
Yes.
We hear people talk about social justice. Mm-hmm. What exactly does that word mean? Because it seems to encompass so many things.
Mm-hmm. I would say that social justice really speaks to equal rights and dignity and human rights for all of humanity and all of the people in the world, regardless of your race or your gender or your sexuality or your age. Social justice really speaks to everybody being treated with love and valued by their society.
Well, I mean, it's easy to say, okay, everybody should be treated equal. Is it, does it work in application? Does it really work?
I would say it does work, and the work of social justice doesn't have an end, because as we know that we live in a world that is very unjust, and one group is always ready to oppress another. And if we look at the history of South Africa about the fact that there was racism based on race, so that was an injustice. And it took many, many years to be able to overcome that racist regime and get a multicultural government which is representative of all the people of South Africa. So yes, it does work. It's a continuum. And that needs to be worked on under all circumstances, because a lot of people are still suffering a lot of injustice locally and globally.
So in terms of South Africa, it worked.
Yes, yes, it did.
At least it did work for.
It did.
In terms of, does that mean that South Africa no longer suffer from discrimination, or is just a different type of discrimination at this time?
You know, discrimination, as you know, is often systematic. So even if the laws of a country will say that there shouldn't be any more discrimination, I mean, if you look at the case in the United States, that the African Americans do still suffer discrimination, even if they have equal rights as the members of the society. So discrimination is always systematic, and it is something that we always need to be aware of and be able to handle as we come across it and with specific cases. So racism will always be there, whether in South Africa or in another part of the world, unfortunately. And of course, because racism is a social construct, and it is there to support the economic systems of many parts of the world, in many parts of the world.
For example, in South Africa,
yes,
there was, prior to their democracy, mm-hmm, there was unequal distribution of wealth. That was very clear.
Yes.
Is that still the same today?
Legislatively, it's not supposed to be, but as you know, where there's been a long history of an injustice and lack of fair distribution of wealth, it's going to take many generations to be able to overcome that. But yes, steps have been made to correct the past, but like I said, it's going to take many, many years, and there's still a whole lot of work to be done, because in many parts, in South Africa and in many parts of the world, the poor get poorer and the rich get richer, and the gap, widens, unfortunately. So that equal distribution of wealth is a phenomenon that not only South Africa is, working on and struggling with. It's all over the world, and in many parts of Africa too.
You do agree that sometime in the process of trying to balance this wealth thing,
Yes.
That people, it's a two-pronged thing where people see, okay, the ones you're taking it away from, seeing it as injustice. Then the one you're giving it to, seeing it as, oh, we're getting back what belonged to us. And that is happening in South Africa. And people, for instance, that some of the people, their lands, that took their lands before, and then their lands is taken back, and then some. So in the process of doing this, people still, justice is really not resolved.
The work of justice will never end. We have to continue to work for social justice for every single human being in this world, whether you're a female, whether you're a child, especially for the most vulnerable populations that are not able to advocate for themselves. The work of social justice, and as you know, when it comes to wealth discrimination, is that it's like a pie. Everybody wants their slice. And if other people were not trying to take the bigger part of the pie, maybe there'll be better social justice in the world. But as you know, it's like a bunch of hungry children around the pie, and everybody wants a big slice. And of course, somebody usually lands up with a bigger chunk of the pie and leaves the crumbs for everybody else. So how else are you going to resolve it? You still have to continue to work for fairness and for equality and for dignity, and for everybody who's involved.
Okay. Yeah. And in terms of human rights in
Yes.
Africa, we still have regions where women are not allowed to go to school. Girls are given out to marriage at an early age.
Yes.
Could we do something? Is there something that could be done to get rid of this old culture?
Yes, and something is being done. As you know, that culture and traditions, whether they're cultural or religious or whatever the reason for culture, it is also systematic. And there are a lot of organizations that are working to educate and enlighten those cultures of the women, especially the older women, because what happens with certain traditions is that one tradition moves from one generation to the other, it's passed on to the other, and sometimes even us women participate in oppressing other women, or we participate in our own oppression. So so there are people and organizations and a lot of NGOs that are actually working with women in those cultures to show them that there are other options and that there are other choices, and to show them the pros and cons of whatever it is that discrimination or the pain that is inflicted on those women. And many times a lot of women don't have choices, or they don't know any better.
I want you to hold that thought, because women, you made a point where you said sometimes women are the ones enabling the behavior.
Yes.
And I want us to come back, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about that. Okay. We are going to take a short break, and we'll come back and continue to discuss young women not being sent to school, how social justice is being affected in that area. Welcome back to Africa Express. You have been watching Reverend Montajane from South Africa talking about social justice. Before we took a short break, we were discussing the improvements, the things that has been put in place and done in Africa in regards to girls going back to school, and what we could do as a nation, and to get rid of those old cultural ways of doing things, to help us expedite the process of sending girls to school. Reverend Montajane, before we took a break, you were giving us some examples of some of the work that has been done, and that a lot of NGOs have been doing a lot of work in terms of doing sending girls to school and not letting them get married early. Could you just give us a few more examples of those?
Well, to get back to social justice and education, it's important that some of us who have had exposure and have had the opportunity to go to school and travel the world and have been able to live overseas, not to forget where we come from, and to always bear in mind that each of us is representing other women that would love to have the opportunities that we have. So one of the ways that we could do it is to go back to our villages and to our tribes and to our relatives, and number one, be an example of how we treat each other, even within the family, in our cultures, and respect each other. And for instance, you know, the fact that if you're a daughter-in-law, you have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and, you know, go get water for everybody, and all the other women or other younger women or your sisters-in-law are sleeping. You know, as women, we need to support each other and work with each other and be able to share some of what we have experienced, and continue to sensitize ourselves and others about the fact that we need to treat each other, even as women, with dignity, and that everybody deserves equal opportunities as women.
The woman is really the head of the family.
Yes, they are.
And she's the one that's going to teach the kids. And if she doesn't know anything, how is she going to teach the next generation?
Yes.
In terms of politics,
Yes.
we do still see imbalance of women getting into politics in Africa as a whole. What do you see as the major hindrance to women really actually getting into the political arena?
I think you could say, I mean, there are a lot of facets. It's economic, it's academic, it's social. There are a lot of layers that women have to overcome, and obstacles that women have to overcome in order for them to be active in politics. But I mean, we have to also take the time to celebrate the women that are representing us in many parliaments all over the world, including in Africa. Actually, Rwanda has the highest number of women in parliament.
Really?
Yes, in the world. And then second is Sweden, and third is South Africa. So there are many strides that have been made by many women, but the work is there's still a lot to be done, because demographically, women are the ones that are in the majority in terms of numbers, but when it comes to representation, where decisions are made that have a direct impact on the lives of women and their children, and of course their families, the women's voice is not well represented. Or if women are in those positions where decisions are made, the numbers are not there, so their voice gets lost, you know, and gets dominated. So as a result, the decisions that they could be able to have a major impact on don't get made. And as a result, that's why I believe that it is actually a disservice for any society not to have equal representation in terms of males or females, or even racially, that everybody should be well represented based on the demographics of the country and of those regions.
But maybe women, they tend to be more sensitive to home, what goes on in the home, who is going to take care of the home. You know, I'm not saying that men are insensitive, but I think I see some of these things, some of these home issues, being a hindrance to a woman wanting to jump into a political arena, because there's a lot of work involved.
Blessing. Everybody could always come up with a lot of hindrances. And the wonderful thing about about the African culture too, and I can also speak specifically to South Africa, is that women also are very resourceful, and we know how to create a very good, supportive system around us. You know, so I don't buy into the fact that women are more sensitive to the family, and if we get into politics, what's going to happen to our children? Children have been raised, and in the African culture, children are raised by their grandparents, they're raised by relatives. We are lucky and blessed in many ways that we have helpers full time. And when your children are small, I remember when, you know, I was a human resources director and I was nursing my son, I could take my helper and my son, and we went away for the week to a conference where there were men there. And so during lunch hour or tea time, I would go to my hotel room and my son was there. So, you know, resources have been made, and a lot of organizations also, you know, have also taken the time to even have daycares at work, you know, for women. But I'm sure if there were more women, even in the corporate world or in government, would have more resources where, you know, you could, you know, take your children down, you know, leave them at daycare, and 2 steps later you're in your office, and, you know, during lunch hour you can go check on them, or, you know, be able to not have to drive hours to go pick them up. So where there's a will, there's a way. And so I don't want to put hindrances about family matters as the justification for women not being well represented, whether economically or politically or socially.
We are going to take a short break, and we'll come back and continue to discuss this issue of women, women empowerment, especially getting out there and be part of the decision making. Welcome back to Africa Express. We are still here with Reverend Montajane. We are discussing social justice and its relevance and the distribution of social justice, especially when it pertains to women in Africa, and how far have we come in terms of trying to balance the equation of power with women in that region. Reverend Montajane, before we took a break, we were talking about power balance and women not being afraid to do what they need to do. They should get out there, participate in government. Mm-hmm. And they have been doing that, some of them.
Yes.
For instance, we have the president of Liberia being a woman. And then we have our mother, Winnie Mandela, who fought tirelessly, yes, for years for her husband. And personally, on my own personal note, I wish every woman could be like her, who would, you know, be out there and take a stand when they need to take a stand, mm-hmm, and not be afraid of repercussions or what need to be, but and still have a home, which she did.
Yes.
You know, in light of her predicament.
Yes.
Now, in terms of justice with women in the workplace, mm-hmm, we still see less women as CEOs.
Yes, we do. Mm-hmm.
Women are still being paid less money, although they do the same job as men.
Yes, they do.
Do you see this trend ever changing, or
It has to change. And that's why when we began our interview, we talked about the fact that the work of social justice there isn't an end. And as you know, that the injustice, like I said, that it's always systematic. So a lot of organizations, a lot of for-profit companies would still not pay women the same amount as they would pay a man for the same job, or the skills or the qualifications or the experience that women, would bring to the job. So we have to continue, case by case, piece by piece, continue to work towards justice for women, not only economically but also politically and socially, in terms of healthcare and access to clean water. I mean, there are a lot of different levels. So the work of social justice, it never ends, and equality. And you can't always rely on the oppressor to give you your rights. You have to demand them.
right?
Yes. If you sit back, they'll always be sitting on top of you and you'll be the doormat for the rest of your life. It's for us as women to stand up and to speak out and challenge those systems or any forms of discrimination that create injustice for so many women and children all over the world.
It's easy for you and I to say, because we probably are assertive women. We'll get out there, we'll say, okay, we need this. Some women, again, you be in a situation where you look at it. For instance, you are overlooked for a promotion that is actually, you do more work, better work than the male that is given chief executive officer. Mm-hmm. And you look at it, say, okay, if I speak up, I get fired. In fact, they will find a reason, mm-hmm. not, because we all know that you cannot just come out and fire somebody.
Yes.
But here in this society, in America, mm-hmm. you can't just do that. But within the, may I say specifically, African countries, mm-hmm. you can't really say much. A woman cannot say, look, women still face a lot of obstacles at work, whereby you can't say anything. First of all, you're probably being harassed at the office if you say, look, John Brown, you gave him a job, my job, that I think I'm qualified for, and I didn't get, you gave it to him. And even when you come back at home and even say, look, this is what's going on, people are going to discourage you. Are you not a woman? So how do we deal with those, the issues of, okay, we got to answer to everybody. We seem to answer to everybody, where sometimes within the workplace, men don't think they need to answer, give reason to everybody for what's going, for them speaking up.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pastor, I think if you look at any social justice or any movements that have succeeded in challenging any form of oppression successfully, it takes people to organize. And as women, you speak to each other. You see what you can do to help. You seek other people's advice, even the elders or other women that have succeeded, that are already, members of parliament, or that are already presidents, or, that are managers. You find people that you can align yourself with, that you can trust, because trust is also a major issue.
Right.
And that confidentiality will be kept. And then come up with a strategy of how you're going to tackle, whatever it is, the challenge that you're facing, either at work or at home. But it also begins with people communicating. And that's, if you look at the case in Egypt right now, it took an injustice of a young man being beaten up by police, and then people started talking, and the youth said, enough is enough. And then the social network on the internet, now it's high tech. And then, now it's a whole movement that is saying enough of 30 years of a regime that has been oppressing us. So, And I love the quote that always says that good girls never make history.
Really?
Yes. So if you are a good girl and you don't challenge systems, you'll never make history. And there always has to be a first. There's always the first woman that goes into space as an astronaut. There's always a first woman who, is the president of an African country. There's always a first. And if you spoke or read or studied those women that did their firsts, it wasn't easy. Even as a minister, there's always a first woman who got ordained, or the first group of women that for many years and generations, women were not to be ordained. And, the men who are even clergy were even quoting scripture against the ordination of women. So there are so many systems, and so that the oppressor will always find good excuses to justify their behavior or their actions or their discrimination. But unless those women push the doors of ordinations by saying, I'm called to serve God and I deserve to go to seminary and do a graduate degree and get a Master of Divinity and go through the process and jump the hoops, and yes, I am called, so I can also get ordained. Why not? And why is it that, where is it in the scriptures that it says women can't get ordained, or Jesus never had, female disciples? Yes, Jesus did.
And which he did.
Yes, he did. The women were the first that Jesus appeared to the women first, and the women got up early and they went to the graveside, and
and the woman anointed him.
Yes,
also.
Oh, yes, they did.
Yes.
So and the men were hiding, in the upper room. They were still afraid, and then the women had to go tell them and say, "You won't believe what happened. The biggest miracle has ever. We've just seen Christ." So, so there are no. Of course, there are obstacles, but as women, we need to continue to challenge them so that progress can be made. And the next generation of women, whether it's in terms of ordination or in terms of politics or healthcare or economically, that the boundaries have to continue to be pushed for social justice and for dignity for all of humanity.
Thank you so much. That was well said. Reverend Montajane, I really do appreciate you coming to the show. We are going to round up. I want to thank you out there. Also, Reverend Montajane just threw a challenge to the next generation of women, that we need, that those of us that are still here and those of us that are coming up, that if you don't stand up for something, then it would never be resolved. That there are still so many things, issues that need to be sorted out in terms of women having access to health care, being part of the political system, being part of economic power, all that. And that young women out there should learn how to speak up for themselves where you see an injustice being done. That keeping quiet would not help us solve this problem. And as women, we are determined to move forward and to break those barriers. And if you are watching, I want to thank you for staying with us on Africa Express. And please do stay with us and continue to watch Africa Express on this same channel, same time. And thank you.